The Strangers Chapter 1 just dropped, so I'm sure you're all wondering, A, is it good, and B, should I spend my hard-earned money on this thing and go see it in theaters, or should I wait until it's streaming? We're going to get to all of that and more here in this video. Welcome to the Nonstop Horror YouTube channel. My name is Cameron, and today, like I said, we're talking about Strangers Chapter 1. This is a reboot of the Strangers series, which only consists of 2 movies so far. This new film stars Madeleine Petsch, which if you're like me and don't know any idea who she is, let me catch you up. She starred in the TV show Riverdale. Never seen an episode of that in my life, but there you go. This movie is also directed by Renny Harlin, who is no stranger to horror. He has directed movies like Deep Blue Sea, Devil's Pass, and also the 4th installment in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So on paper, this is pretty promising. I just want to let you know, similar to my review of Baby Reindeer, the first few minutes of this video are going to be spoiler free, so you don't have to worry about finding anything out that you don't want to yet, and then the back half of the video will be kind of a recap and my personal thoughts about specifics that happen in the movie. So there will be spoilers in the second half of the video. The original Strangers came out in 2008 and it starred Liv Tyler, and it is a very great movie. There's a lot of dread and suspenseful atmosphere in that movie, so it's definitely a lot to live up to. And then its sequel, Pray at Night, came out like 10 years later, I believe, and I don't remember much from the second film, but I'm pretty sure the killers like die at the end, so that might be the reasoning why they need to make this a prequel instead of a remake or sequel. We'll definitely touch on the labeling and mislabeling of this movie later on in the video. So as you can tell by the title of this movie, there are going to be multiple movies. There are going to be 3 of them, Chapter 1, 2, and 3. And it just feels kind of confusing how they've been marketing this movie. There's an interview with the director where he stated that like the quality of the original is really intimidating to him, and if he was to make if it was going to be a direct remake or sequel, he wouldn't have made it at this time in his life. I honestly feel like he's just afraid of living up to the original movie, which is understandable. Like, it's a good fucking movie. In the original, this couple comes home to this vacation home, which I believe belongs to the dude's family. They had just attended a wedding and they were fighting, so tensions are already high. And then these 3 masked strangers terrorized them that evening. On paper, this storyline is a little bit different. It's about Maya, who is traveling across the United States to interview at an architecture firm, and she brings along her boyfriend, Ryan. They're traveling through Oregon, and at a certain point, of course, they get hungry, so they decide to stop at this little ho-dunk diner called Carol's Diner, which why didn't they just stop at a McDonald's or Taco Bell like a normal couple? But they stop off in this town called Venus, and all the inhabitants of this town are acting really super strange and very standoffish and defensive for some reason. After they get done eating, they try to start their car to head on their way, and the car, of course, is not starting now. It's broken down, and they're forced to stay in this isolated Airbnb in the town, which there are so many red flags already. So they're staying at this isolated Airbnb in the middle of the woods, and then they are also terrorized by these 3 masked strangers. Very similar to the first movie. Like the original, there is a disclaimer at the beginning of this movie talking about how many violent crimes there are in the United States every year, and this is one of them, and like this is the story of one of the most brutal. And I'm just gonna say right now, it does not deliver on that premise at all. You kind of get to the end of the movie, and I personally was like, is that it? Like, it was just super underwhelming. This is a very silly and flawed movie. There's so many things that I could talk about here in the spoiler-free part of the review. I want to touch on the cinematography. There were so many like fake out moments throughout the movie that you were supposed to be scared during, and you were like anticipating a jump scare and then it didn't happen, which can be effective a couple times in a movie, but it happened a lot of times and it was very distracting. There were also other moments that could have been effective in the way that they were filmed, except the shots lingered a little bit too long for my liking, and then it's kind of like turns into like a we get it, like this is happening moment. A lot of this just felt like someone proving to themselves that they could operate a movie camera, and a lot of it just was filmed without intent, I feel like, and it was just supposed to be like for the sake of being a cool shot or something like that. I think it fails on creating the atmosphere and the dread and the suspense that the original creates. It just fails on a lot of fronts. I know the marketing is so confusing around this movie. Is it a reboot? Is it a remake? Is it a relaunch? Is it a prequel? What is it? I definitely don't think that it warrants the title prequel. It feels like a rehash of the original. I'm gonna say that straight up. They tried to make some adjustments here and there, like the setting most importantly, but the new setting just kind of takes away from the disturbing nature of the original film. In the original film, they're at this safe spot. It's his family's home, like that's where you're supposed to be safe, and then they get terrorized by these strangers. In chapter 1, it's just a series of red flags that leads this couple to in the situation that they end up being in, and it feels like it could have been prevented at so many spots along the way. Because it is essentially a rehash of the original, a lot of it is very predictable, but I think even if it was a standalone film, a lot of it would have been predictable. My wife and I exchanged many glances throughout the movie as if, like, you know, did that really just happen? Or like, that was really dumb. Like, did they just say that? Did they just do that? So yeah, I think it's just a very underwhelming movie, even as a standalone if it wasn't part of this trilogy. They leave it pretty open-ended in the ending, obviously, to leave room for the chapters 2 and 3. So one thing I can say is don't expect it to be like an anthology with like 3 different stories. This is all one connected story. I read online that there's even going to be like a supercut of all 3 chapters at some point, which, okay, like, I don't know if we need that, but all right. So if you want my personal opinion, I would not spend your money on this movie. I would wait for it to come to streaming in a month or 2. One thing I'll suggest at this point is if you haven't seen the original, definitely go check it out. It is streaming on HBO Max right now, and I also have a link to the original movie in the description of this video. To sum up the spoiler-free section of this, there are a few questions that I can just straight up answer. Was it scary? No. Was it suspenseful? Was it better than the original? No. The acting, subpar. Would I watch it again? I don't think so, although it did leave me pretty intrigued to see what happens in chapters 2 and 3, so in a sense they succeeded, but they're gonna need to work some miracles in chapters 2 and 3 to revive this. Okay, so for those who haven't seen it, make sure to like the video and subscribe, and then you can come back after you've seen the movie, and I'd love to know what you think down in the comments below. Okay, big warning here, that's the end of the spoiler-free section of the video. From here on out, there will be spoilers, so I'm warning you up front right now. This movie has very few redeeming qualities. Let me take a sip. It starts off with like the lamest paint by numbers opening scene, which is just a guy running through the woods, and then the 3 killers catch up to him and they kill him with the axe, which they don't even show that kill. They like hide it behind a panning shot behind a tree, which felt like a very weak move. Like, show us that kill at the very beginning of the movie. I'd be way more intrigued than I felt with how it actually was filmed. One of the greatest things about the original, and this actually isn't a spoiler for the new one because I'm pretty sure it's shown in one of the trailers, the peak of the series is when they say, like, Liv Tyler asks the killers, "Why are you doing this?" And one of the masked strangers just says, "Because you were home." In this one, the line has changed to just say, "Because you were here," like, which has very little impact. It doesn't really flow as well as the other one. And of course, they can't just reuse the line because they're not at their home. I feel like they just could have used a different line entirely to try and drive home how disturbing and unfortunate this situation is for the couple. Especially in the beginning of the film, they try saving this movie with a lot of comedic relief. Now, comedy is a very big part of what makes horror great at times, whether it be the comedic relief or the campiness. The comedic relief in this movie, it mostly comes from the guy, Ryan, and it just falls very flat. Like, every joke he made. Like, if this guy came into my diner and started making these jokes, like, I'd want to end him too. The events in this movie are framed as things that could have totally been prevented, which is not how it is in the original. This couple makes a lot of dumb decisions. There are a lot of red flags that they ignore, or at least Maya ignores them. I never felt truly scared. A lot of it was predictable, saw a lot of it coming. And yeah, I just didn't really feel the suspense of it all. I think I mentioned this already, but because it was basically a remake, a lot of the movie was predictable. Like, I knew that Ryan was going to accidentally kill the fridge guy who ended up being the homeowner as well, but that plot point hits so much harder. It's such a punch to the gut in the original film because he ends up accidentally killing his friend. And then right after that kill, the guy had shown up in a Jeep, so they have the brilliant idea of escaping in his Jeep. So they get in the Jeep, they're driving away, they get rammed by this big pickup truck that is driven by the masked man. of the three strangers, and he's ramming them into a tree. After they get pinned against the tree, Maya like escapes out the window and runs off, and Ryan's stuck there because his foot is like jammed between the door and something else. And then the masked man is like standing in front of the Jeep, and Ryan shoots at him twice and misses somehow with this shotgun that they found. But seconds before that, he was a super shot when he accidentally killed the fridge guy / owner. And then after he misses, the masked man like goes off somewhere, and instead of going out of the Jeep the same way Maya just successfully did, Ryan has to like pave his own way out of the Jeep and kicks out the windshield. And then in like the dumbest, most unexplainable part of the movie, Ryan gets out of the Jeep. The big pickup truck is still kind of jammed against the Jeep and the tree, and it's running. The keys are in the car, it's on, and the masked man has run off somewhere, and Ryan is just like sneaking and scooting around the truck. Like, dude, get in the, like, why didn't he get in the truck? This was one of the biggest plot holes in this movie. He just disregards the fact that they have a running vehicle right there. The only explanation that sort of makes sense is that he didn't want to leave without Maya, which I kind of get, but the alternative is running into these unfamiliar woods in the middle of the night and to try and find each other without making any sort of noise. It's just one of the dumbest decisions I've seen in a horror movie. There's also a scene where the three strangers like first end up in the house with the couple, and then it just like they're in the same room, and then like the next scene that cuts to is them just hiding in a bedroom. You don't really know how they got there. It makes like very little sense how they got into that room. Like the strangers just stand there and like just literally do nothing as they ran away. Maybe, but it was just a very jarring cut there. Also regarding the shotgun, there's a point where the masked man has like his arm around Maya and is holding her against this broken window, and Ryan comes down the stairs with a shotgun and shoots at the guy through the window, which seems like a very dangerous move. Like there's literally 1 inch between Maya and the killer, and it seemed very unrealistic and a very dumb decision to shoot in that direction at that time. I mentioned earlier like one of the lingering shots that turned into like a we get it kind of moment, and it's when Maya, who apparently knows how to play piano, she's playing at the piano, and the camera keeps cutting back to a shot from in front of her and behind her, and then eventually like you know that you're gonna see the killer at some point, because in the original like there's a really creepy shot where it pans to the front shot of Liv Tyler, and in the background you can see the masked man. Very disturbing scene in the original, but in this one you're like waiting for it to happen, and I glanced down at my seat as I was adjusting it, and I looked back up during that scene. I had to ask my wife, like, wait, did we see the guy behind her? Like, did that happen? And she's like, no. A lot of missed opportunities there, but when we do eventually see the villain, it's because there's a mirror above the piano, and it just like lingers on the shot for way too long. Like you can see him in the mirror as she's playing the piano. She can't see him, but we can. And it lingers way too long where you're like, okay, I get it. Whereas if it was much quicker, you would have just been like, oh shit, I'm pretty sure I saw the killer, but they didn't overstep it. I don't know. Maybe that's just my opinion, but it felt like a very drawn out shot. Ryan needs like an inhaler, and it felt like a very forced plot point. The only time it really comes to fruition is when he's running from the masked man in the forest, and of course there needs to be a reason. He needs to make a sound, and he doesn't have his inhaler. He's kind of wheezing. He needs to catch his breath, and he finds some random water bottle and does this like weird hack with it. And so he has to like crunch the water bottle, and that's the only reason the masked man finds him. But everything with the inhaler was just like thrown in our face and was very predictable. There's another moment where Ryan gets the upper hand on one of the killers, and he's behind them with the shotgun like pointed at their head, and he's like threatening her, but he never pulls the trigger. He's just like giving this monologue. He has her turn around, and she grabs the gun, and it's like, at that point, you shoot, motherfucker. She's about to take the gun from you. And he just stands there and does absolutely nothing. He has this hacky line that's like, you know how they say your first kill is the hardest, and then he's like, you're my second, which was so dumb, because it's not like the first kill was accidental. It's such a dumb line. But as he says that, like the masked man runs up to him and punches him because he's spent like 5 minutes pointing his gun at this chick. And then that leads to apparently one of the most brutal scenes in US history. They've both been knocked out, Maya and Ryan, because Maya was also found because there's so much to talk about with this movie. Maya, after she runs out of the Jeep, she escapes and gets into this like really wide like open clearing and hides under a bunch of leaves, which is very successful. And she found a cell phone in the Jeep, so she's hiding under the leaves, and one of the killers is obviously like looking for her and doesn't find her, walks away, and she's trying to call the police on the cell phone. Of course, there's like not the greatest service out there, but she gets through to them and she's talking to them. And then instead of just staying there under the leaves where she knows she's safe, she gets up and starts walking around and eventually is spotted by the killer again. And then she gets knocked out. I forget how she even got knocked out. I think the chick probably just punched her. So then fast forward, after Ryan gets knocked out, Maya's knocked out, they both wake up tied to these chairs in the home. And they have this really emotional moment. They're just boyfriend and girlfriend, right? And there's like this throwaway line in the diner when they're eating about like, why haven't you put a ring on her finger yet? And then in this moment where they're both tied up to the chairs and they're like basically about to die, the guy, Ryan, like asks her like, will you marry me? And it's supposed to be this like big sappy like, oh my god, romantic moment, like, oh my god, this is so sad. Except in my mind, like the way it was filmed, it made me keep expecting that they were, because it was very zoomed in, it made me expect for them to like cut to a wide shot where, you know, that trope where two people are having a really intense conversation and then it pans out and there's a third person there and it's supposed to be like comedic relief. I just kept expecting that the whole time, and that wasn't completely far away from the truth, because the three strangers are just standing there, and after they have this heart-wrenching moment, Ryan just gets stabbed in the stomach. And that's the extent of the brutality of his death. He gets stabbed like once, and then the masked man like walks at the slowest fucking pace you can around the couple to behind them, and then he just kicks Ryan over in his chair. And in that moment they try to exaggerate it and make it seem like it's this huge like epic moment with the music and and Maya screaming. She screams more in that moment than when he first got stabbed, I think. And then like, yeah, he gets kicked over, and then he bleeds out, apparently, I guess. And then that's when Maya asks them like why they're doing it, and they just said because you're here. And then they stab Maya and also kick her over, so they're both just laying on the ground. And then I just realized that this part makes very little sense as well. But the masked killers, they're in the house, they just killed Maya and Ryan, and then they hear sirens, and they like look at each other like, what the hell, like why are there cops coming? And then they leave in the pickup truck that Ryan neglected earlier on. It's working just fine, so we can't say that it was too broken from ramming the Jeep. But anyway, they get in it and they drive a little ways down the road before they even can see the cops, and they turn off the side road. So like, how could they hear the cops from so far away? I don't know if the sound would have traveled that far. Feels like another plot point that I'm just realizing in my head right now. So yeah, they're coming down this windy road and they take a different turn so that when the cops are coming this way, they don't see them. Very, very great trope. And then the cops are the ones that find Maya and Ryan, obviously. And then the movie ends and there's a great like to be continued title card shown, as if anyone is like super stoked to see the rest of the story unfold. And then there is a mid-credits scene where we see Maya laying in a hospital bed, and it kind of zooms in on her, and she wakes up. It's the middle of the night. It's raining, of course. And she wakes up, she sits up, and then you can see the masked man like laying in the bed next to her. And please, dear God, this better be a dream sequence, because otherwise it's rooted in no sense of reality. That makes no sense unless it's a dream sequence and she's like traumatized in the hospital. Please let that be a dream sequence. So yeah, that's about all the thoughts I had about this. There's so much more to talk about if I wanted to recap the whole movie, but those are the sticking points that really made me not like this movie. I wanted to know more about the town. I wanted to know if our paranoia and Ryan's paranoia were justified at all, or if the people in town really had anything to do with it. So they do have me interested in knowing what's going to happen in chapters 2 and 3. I want to know what kind of twist they're going to put on this. Is it that is it possible that the whole town was in on it and it's some sort of religious cult thing? If that is the twist that they reveal in chapters 2 and 3, it'll be really disappointing. That just takes away from how disturbing it is in the original film. that this is just like a random event that happened to this unfortunate couple. Throwing in a cult aspect with like pre-planned shenanigans just kind of takes away from that entirely. Even though the director explicitly says it's not a remake, I will say it's more of a remake than a prequel or a sequel or anything like that. So I think the proper like naming of it would be a reboot or a relaunch, I think is another term that I saw mentioned somewhere. A lot of it just feels like a step-by-step rehash of the 2008 film. And at that point, you might as well just go watch the 2008 film, which again is linked down below. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get more interest in chapters 2 and 3, but we'll have to see. Luckily, I guess, kind of luckily, we'll get those answers within the next year or so, because chapter 2 is supposed to be released this fall, and then chapter 3 either at the end of this year or early next year. I'm just thinking to myself, why in the hell didn't that couple just stop at a McDonald's, stop at a Taco Bell, not Carol's Diner? Those are my thoughts. I'd love to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Was I a little bit too harsh on this film, or was I justified? Did you enjoy it? Let me know why you enjoyed it if you did. Like the video, subscribe, stay tuned for more fun, exciting, and informative horror content. Make sure to embrace the fear all year round.